So I was ready to move on, and I was ready to move on with Vicki. Now in my mindset, I'm like, okay, make her feel like she's number one. The other girl, she's in the past. My daughter's gonna be in between, and we're gonna navigate this together. And during that time, I realized when things started getting serious, like Vicki she brought a lot of wisdom into raising a child, raising a daughter. Things like I would never see. And I said, okay. So I realized that I had to trust her. I had to trust her with her wisdom and with her knowledge. And it was crazy because Vicki's never been married before, but she knew how to she was navigating me through this season of marriage, stepping into marriage and raising a daughter. But I think to answer your question, I wanted her to feel secure and, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm in my 30s now. I don't have time to waste. I'm sticking through this, and I'm in for the hauls.
This week on Marriage, Life, and More, we welcome Scottie and Vicky Albious into the studio, and they're going to be sharing their testimony and some things about the life that they've lived, and we'll be back with that right after this. Welcome to Marriage, Life, and More. This is a podcast about marriage, Bible, and book studies. We interview people with inspiring stories. I'm Daniel Moore, your host. I have Michelle, my beautiful co-host, here with me this week. Thank you guys for joining us this week. If you're not familiar with our show, check out our website at www.marriagelifeandmore.com for all of our platforms. Our YouTube and Rumble links are there. We're also on the Christian podcasting app Edify. We're also on your Alexa and Google smart devices. If you can visit us on social, we'd appreciate that. We're on Facebook and Instagram at CT Gap Online. If you're a fan of our show, please subscribe. Feel free to leave a comment on our platforms. Give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review on Apple, and we'd be eternally grateful for you for doing that. So thank you guys for joining us this week. As I mentioned here in the intro, we have an awesome couple sitting here with us this week, Scottie and Vicky Albious. And this week, we're going to be talking a little bit about a scenario where when people come together to get married, one of the spouses has been married before and the other one has not. So it's going to be a very good episode, and we hope that you'll enjoy that this week.
Woohoo! We're excited to be here. First of all, I just want to say thank you guys for having us. It's an honor to be here with you, and man, I'm just excited for what God's doing in your ministries moving forward. And our prayer is that God uses you guys more as a bright light in marriages and relationships, pre-marriages and things like that. So it's a total honor to be here. So thank you so much.
Yes. Well, we're thankful to have you guys here. And of course, one thing I do want to share with our listeners, Michelle and I just did a pretty long, about a 4-month study on the 4 laws of love. And throughout that series, we mentioned several times about a couple that has really been an inspiration to us as we've been through this walk in our own marriage and everything. And Scottie and Vicky are the couple that we were referring to. And they got us to go into XO conference. We went to a couple of those with you guys, and that really opened our eyes up to a lot of new things, just even within our own marriages and everything. And so we're super thankful and excited to have you guys on the podcast finally, and let other people get to meet you guys.
And can we say, I think we felt the same way you guys fed into us when it came into marriage things and blended family things. And there was times in our life where the enemy wanted us to feel like we were lonely and left out and no one can understand. And it was almost like we ran into each other at perfect timing.
Yeah.
So thank you guys as well. It was awesome.
We go way back to, Michelle and I mentioned a few times about Altered. It's a life group that we used to lead at a different church. We were going together at that. We started that ministry from the ground up, and that was just an awesome, I think about 5 years. I think it was that we did that. It was a college aged life group and young adults that were kind of getting career minded and whatever. And so that was a really exciting time to get to serve next to you guys. And
Oh yeah.
So
it was
fun.
a lot of fun. So it's kind of crazy how God just takes us from, points in our life to different points in our life.
yeah.
And how things change, but the friendships are there forever. And that's just
Yes.
something that,
Right.
that I really am super thankful for.
Absolutely.
So as we get started here, first, I want to just let you guys just have an opportunity. Just tell us about you, your family, just anything that our listeners would like to know about Scottie and Vicky.
Well, we've been married it'll be 11 years this August. And we have 3 beautiful kiddos. Our daughter's 17, Kira, and then Israel is 9, almost 10, which is hard to believe.
Wow.
And then Titus is 7, almost 8 in July, and just lots of life and craziness, but so good. But we've known each other probably a good 14 or 15 years, went to church for a while before we started dating. And it was just one of those things where my dad actually was like, Vicki, why don't you date Scottie? And I was like, no. Like, we played volleyball and stuff together at the church we were at, and he was like, why don't you date Scottie? I'm like, no, he's too short.
What?
No.
Totally understand that, Vicki. Totally get that.
And
Shots
so we just started becoming friends, talking more and more. And he actually tried to prank me one night, and we ended up on the phone for 6 hours after that, just talking about life and ministry and growing up and all this kind of stuff, and kind of just kicked off from there. I think we talked pretty much every day after that. Mm-hmm. And it's just been awesome. And my dad was so excited when we started dating, and he loves Scottie to pieces. But
So you can blame your dad for all of that then.
yes, I can't wear high heels anymore because then I tower over him.
You know what's funny? I went when we're getting ready to go on our cruise, and I want this elegant dress, and I'm like, I can't wear high heels because I'm going to be taller than you. So I totally understand that.
Well, I'll tell you what, whenever that situation comes, Dan and I we'll wear the high heels for you. So there we go. There we go. Problem solved. You're welcome. No, I think what Vicki was saying is, being married during that time of just both of our singleness. I was probably about 2-3 years in singleness, and I was walking through a divorce, and that time it was just really, really tough because in that moment, I was in a dark place of questioning, God, I did this in church, and I served here, and I helped lead that, and I'm going through this. So I was just going to be single for a while. And then I had my daughter, which at the time she was 4 or 5. And I just wanted to focus on her. And I told Vicki before meeting her, I was just going to focus on raising my kid, and I wasn't going to date until she was like in her teens, because I didn't want to deal with the dynamics and deal with another woman coming in, deal with my ex-wife, dealing with this person. So I had all these things that I thought that I was going to have to walk through. But man, it was not like that at all. So I started coming to volleyball, and that's where I met Vicki, and we started talking more, and I started going to church. And I just remember, always she was helping, she was leading worship at the time, and one day she led a song, and I was just always attending church, and then that's when I saw her in a different light. I was like, oh, this girl, she's beautiful, and after that, we started, kind of talking. And I remember one time, was this right shortly after you led, she was coming off the stage, and normally she would go off on the other end, but this time she came off on my end, and I was like, wait a minute, she's trying to catch my attention. Well, it was so cool. That's exactly what happened. So it was so cool. So she was coming down in her heels. And when
I still wore them.
When she still wore them. And as she was coming down off the steps, she tripped with her heels coming off the steps.
Get caught in the carpet. Yeah.
That's when I tell people that's the day that she fell for me. So then I knew that was confirmation from the Lord. I was like, okay, God, this is it. I'm going to pursue my wife. But no, ever since then, it's been awesome, just living life and being married. And, I wouldn't take that back by any means. And, I'm just so thankful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had both went through a season of singleness. I had actually been single for probably 9-10 years, and just a big time of just growing in the Lord through my 20s. And then he had been single for around 3 years when we had met and finally started talking more in our relationship. But both in those times of singleness, just such a growing time in the Lord, and figuring out just the things in our life and who we are and, what we really want in a godly spouse. And so such a cool time.
Speaking into that, a lot of times when we come out of high school, a lot of people's minds automatically shift to the boyfriend, girlfriend, getting married thing, having kids and whatever. Yeah. But we know that that's not always God's plan to immediately have that happen as soon as we get out of school. Right. And a lot of people struggle with if there's a significant span of time after they get out of school and they start into the workforce and whatever, they don't seem to find their significant other real quickly. All their other friends are getting married, they're having kids, they're moving on, and here's we are just sitting, where God, where's mine, and that kind of thing, So I always find it interesting when I find people, though, that actually utilize that time to grow.
Yeah.
They do a positive thing with it. A lot of it's negative a lot of times.
Right.
Because they start thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I find my other person? Is God, doing something here that, am I doing something wrong? All these thoughts go through their head. What would you speak just for a second on that? What would you speak to someone that maybe they're in that situation right at the moment, still in that waiting mode?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Man, God's timing is so everything. And, just through those years of singleness, there were definitely times that I just was like, God, seriously, because my parents got married young, and they were like 20, I think. And so I always, growing up, I was like, I want to be a mom. I want to be a wife. I'm going to get married when I'm 20. Mm-hmm. And I was 29 when we finally got married. But, through our 20s is such a growing time. Yes. Like, you truly are learning who you are as a person and who you are in God. And, I had dated a little bit in my teens, not very much. I'd only dated 2 people. One I almost married. And God closed that door. And, through some of those 20s, I was just like, God, when? But then I just was like, no, I'm going to take some of this time, just to really zone in and focus in on just ministry and what are you calling me to do, and I definitely, when Scottie came along, it was just like, okay. And it was just one of those things where I probably would have married him within 3 months because I just knew, but it ended up being 10 months we dated and then married. But definitely just take that time to soak in the time in the presence of the Lord. Because when you get married and you have kids, that all changes.
It does.
A lot. So
such good advice.
Yeah, and there's, a lot of times people, they'll date, during that time, and they'll just jump and marry the wrong person because they're so desperate to have that relationship and that connection to someone that they don't give God time to work. And that's a very dangerous place to be, because that's one reason some of our divorce statistics are so high, because they ended up with the wrong person. They just got ahead of God and ahead of themselves and all of that. And so I think, that's some good advice, just to wait on God and in his timing, because God knows, and he's got a reason for that wait. And I know we all like to have things immediately. We're in this fast food drive-through mode these days, and what I call microwave popcorn days, where you just want things instantly. Yeah. You think about this and you want it. I want it right now, and you just try to do whatever you can to get that.
I've heard it said we're microwave generation serving a crock pot God.
Yeah, there we go. That's good.
Wow.
That is a good way to put that, because God does move a little slower than us sometimes.
All right.
And when he's doing that, we probably need to try to figure out why.
Yes.
Just not jump put the cart before the horse there. So this week, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to have Scottie and Vicky here for 3 episodes, actually. And this is the first one of 3. This week, what we're going to talk a little bit about is, as you guys have shared here in your testimony already, just a little bit, Vicki, you've never been married before.
Right.
And then Scottie had been married and was, divorced when you guys got married. So that creates a little bit of a dynamic where you have to kind of figure things out. It's not like you're two individuals coming into something that neither of you have ever done before. In all reality, one of you's coming in with some baggage. Yeah. And then, the other one has baggage, but a different kind of baggage probably. Right. So you have to try to figure out how to mesh all that together. And so as we get started into this week, Vicki, I'm going to ask you first here, what was it like stepping into your marriage, knowing that Scottie had been married before and you hadn't? How did you prepare your mind? How did you get yourself ready? Was there, how was it an easy thing for you to do, or what was your thought process on that?
I was very prayerful in it, just a lot too, because he had a child, and I did not want to, get so deep into it and have Kira attached if that wasn't God's plan. And so very prayerfully, and I remember sitting down with my mom and dad and just talking to them about it, because I honestly never thought I would marry someone who had been married and who had a child,
right.
Both of those. And so I, was talking to my mom and dad about it, and my dad, well, both of them, mom and dad both were just like, no, Scottie is an amazing man of God. And, there's definitely going to be some rough times, as in any marriage, it definitely adds more dynamics when it is, there's an ex in the situation, but just very prayerfully, and we, pretty early on in our relationship, probably within that first month of dating or so, I told him one night, I said, I really feel like we need to pray together and, ask the Lord, if this is it, God, we want to continue forward if this is your will. But if not, show us, because we don't want to hurt more than what we should. And we definitely didn't want to hurt Kira. And so very prayerfully, and knowing, there would be obstacles to come.
Yeah.
But I had an awesome man of God to walk through those times with. So
Scottie, whenever you decided to pursue this relationship, knowing that what you were bringing into the equation, how did you navigate with the past experiences that you'd had, having a child already and now, having an ex in the picture, the things that you knew was going to be some hurdles that she's going to have to jump through. At the same time, though, making Vicki feel like this was a safe relationship. What's some things that you had to do to prepare for that?
Going into, a relationship, I think what Vicki mentioned earlier, it was definitely led in prayer. Like I said at first, I was like, God, is this right that I'm having feelings? And, I've got to deal with, my daughter and my ex-wife and, this dynamic is going to be totally different. God should show me. And, just over time and just building a friendship with Vicki and just adding on to our relationship and just talking. And, we just had so many coffee dates and time to talk. And I was able to, I think for me to share, that was one of my weaknesses. It's hard to, as I believe as a guy, it's hard to share our feelings, to share our fears, and as learning and God saying, telling me, well, we'll talk about this and tell her about this and tell her how you feel. And, it was really tough, but at the same time, it was so freeing because us men, we don't want to expose those weaknesses, those areas, those fears and things like that. But, knowing Vicki, her compassion and just her grace for, this is what's going to happen. And it was just, and to prepare myself, I had to just ask the Lord to lead me because I wanted the girl that I'm dating then, I wanted her to know that, yes, I came from a past, but that time was over.
Yeah.
I spent time alone. I spent time with the Lord. I spent time asking and over time, God revealing, God confirming some things, my heart, and I was ready to move on. So I was ready to move on, and I was ready to move on with Vicki. Now in my mindset, I'm like, okay, make her feel like she's number one. The other girl, she's in the past. My daughter's going to be in between, and, we're going to navigate this together. And during that time, I realized when things started getting serious, like Vicki she brought a lot of wisdom into raising a child, raising a daughter, things like I would never see. And I said, okay. So I realized that I had to trust her. I had to trust her with her wisdom and with her knowledge. And, it was crazy because Vicki's never been married before, but she knew how to she was navigating me through this season of marriage, stepping into marriage and raising a daughter. But I think to answer your question, I wanted her to feel secure and, hey, I'm not going anywhere. I'm in my 30s now. I don't have time to waste. I'm sticking through this, and, I'm in for the haul. So.
And it took him reassuring me of that sometimes, because I can remember we had went to a concert, and it was before we were married, and his ex-wife had actually just come through a second divorce, or was in the process of it. And she was at that same concert with Kira, and she'd come up to us and was like talking, and she kind of had her hand on Scottie's arm, and I'm standing back and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, but my heart in that too, though, was, once we got in the car and we were headed home, I told him, I said, if you feel that things could work out with her, and it'd be better for your kid, I don't want to get in the way of that. And he was like, I'm going to tell you right here and now, absolutely not. It's like, I'm not going back there. God has, completely, shifted my heart, and I'm moving forward. And, so there were moments that I needed that reassurance, I would say, coming out of that.
I think that's pretty cool, though, that how you had told him that if this is something that you think that you could work out with her, no matter how much you loved him, and you knew he was the one, but yet you were willing to lay that down for Scottie and Kira.
Right.
I love that. I mean, I just love the fact that you loved him that much that you would do that. I love it.
It kind of caught me off guard when she said that, because I was like, what? No, I've moved on. I'm yours, man, and you're not getting rid of me. But no, during that, it's so crazy because whenever that situation happened, I didn't even notice it.
Yeah.
I wasn't even paying attention to it. But then I think the number one thing, especially for men that's come through a relationship, stay single and let God heal.
Yeah.
You might think you're strong enough. You might think you've been married before. You might think you have all the answers. You don't. I'm just going to break it to you. You don't.
Yeah.
God knows the answers. Let him do his thing. Like you mentioned earlier, we live in a microwave society. Dan, you and I were technology guys. We want things boom, boom, boom.
Yep.
If the Wi-Fi lags, we're complaining, things like that. So spend time with the Lord and wait on him, and don't think you know the answer. You don't come up with, I always call these little confirmations. Like if something happens, oh, that's confirmation. Okay, God, I'm moving on, things like that. But no, just truly wait on him and spend time with him.
So earlier you were talking about making sure the communication was there. Did you have communication in your first marriage?
I thought I did, but look how it ended. No, I'm kidding.
I guess my question is, your personality is very outgoing, but is it hard for you when you first met Vicki to communicate and let her know everything that you were feeling?
I think for some stuff it wasn't, because I was always an open book. But like I said, going back to when it came to the heart, when it came to things that really bothered and fear, it was hard. I had to learn, and she was just like, open up, let me know. And, we get in those ruts where she's like, how's work? It was all right.
Yeah.
What'd you do today? No, it just worked,
So you pressed him.
Yeah.
Yep.
That, and I feel like I'm doing it right now. So we're going through, you remember you guys were talking about marriage conferences, and they always said to the guys, in your mind, you start off a sentence with, I feel, and then fill in the blank.
Yeah.
So I would always say I feel, because I'd just be like, this is what I want to do. This is what's going to happen. But now by saying I feel like, fill in the blank, I'm able to, I know it sounds so simple, but communicate it to her. She understands where I'm coming from. She understands my heart. The Bible talks about intimacy and the importance of intimacy between husband and wife. And guys, I speak for guys and myself, we're one of the worst. Intimacy doesn't always mean sex. It just basically means into me, you see. They need to see inside of us. They need to understand our hearts, where we're coming from. They need to feel our fears, feel our pains. We don't want to give it away, but we have to. And then what happens is, man, because I've done it so many times, the Holy Spirit heals those areas and heals that bond between you two,
So good. So good.
So how did you guys, because you've been married before and you've already had a lot of experiences throughout that first marriage, how did you accomplish building something new versus maybe rehashing off of, Scottie, what you had already had in your past? How did you keep those separated?
It took some time. Our first couple of years, it was pretty rough. There was several times that I would have to say, I am not her. Like, you need to stop this, And I just have to be like, I'm saying this or doing this because of this, and it's to benefit all of us, not just myself, And so, I just really need you to think about this or this, and then we can talk about it. But yeah, it took some time.
The first 2 years were really rough. And that's why when Vicki wanted to do the marriage conference, I was like, I definitely want to do marriage conferences because it fixed her.
Yeah.
But man, God had a different plan. Every year I'd be like, oh my gosh, it was me that's the issue. Because when we walked into, as soon as we got married, I've been married before. So all of a sudden I know the answers. I know how to be married. I know what it's like to be married. What's wrong with this woman? How come she's not listening to me? Because I've been experienced. And man, I'll tell you what, when God and when the Holy Spirit opens up your heart to show who you are, you're selfish. You're not listening. You have to be comforting. You have to secure her. And man, you talk about humbling. And and I had to share that with her. That's what was hard. I was like, babe, here's what we're going to do. I'm sorry. And, repent to her, repent to the Lord. And man, just upon that, I think we're not perfect. I've learned as a husband, I'm not perfect. But if I just keep sharing, if I just keep telling her I'm sorry and actually mean it and go, do the walking, it helps heal both of us.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's so good.
Those marriage conferences are brutal for us guys.
Yeah, they are.
It's so funny because, a lot of times we look at our marriages and we think we just have it all figured out to an extent. It's like, this is a no-brainer. This is easy, And then you find out you were doing the whole thing all wrong the whole time. And it's like, no wonder we're having all these problems, Right. But that's a perfect, those conferences definitely show you how, and a lot of that comes from the way we're brought up.
Right. Oh my goodness.
You don't want to blame your parents for anything, obviously, but in all reality, that's who we get our training from for the most part on how we're going to be, doing our marriages later. And unfortunately, our parents didn't have it figured out either in a lot of ways.
True.
And, that just continues through the generations unless that's ever broken.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so thankful for the good marriage conferences.
Yes.
The one we went to with you guys, I thought was phenomenal.
Yes.
It just really, they read your mail. But it's
I always
a good
say
way.
that the only reason we're together, still is, of course, God and our want to, but also because of Jimmy Evans and the EXO conference, because that changed our lives completely.
Sure. Yeah.
Go into that every year just to really go deeper and let God really go deep into our hearts and dig out the things that needed to be let go of.
And you guys were talking to Michelle and I about it, and we were trying to decide, if we was going to be able to go or whatever. And, it's easy to, that's, just a marriage conference. I don't know. That's really important. There's other things we could be doing right now or whatever. But when we decided to go and experience that, it's like, we did need this, it's like way more than we thought we did.
Yeah.
Well, it's so funny because people that would hear we go to this marriage conference every year, they're like, oh, what's wrong with your marriage? They thought it was like, no, this is a great thing. And it helps build your marriage.
Yes.
It's to keep us from killing each other.
Right.
I just find it ironic that every time we go to like a marriage conference, the enemy gets you fighting.
Ooh.
We were always arguing, and it took Vicki to many times saying, "Hey, do you realize what's happening? We're getting ready to go into a marriage conference where the Holy Spirit's going to be there, and it's going to work on our marriage, and it's going to build onto our generations and success, in marriage." And that's when it was almost like an instant light bulb. I was like, "Oh, okay, you're right."
Yeah.
Let's move on, and then I was like, why are we even arguing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Marriage conferences are really a good thing
Yeah.
for your marriages. There's no doubt about that at all. I feel like, it doesn't matter how old you get, how long you're married, you're still going to learn.
so true.
It's a learning process.
Yep.
And it's amazing how many things we're really doing wrong.
Right.
You know, we just
Right.
don't, we think we're doing it all right, but it could be so much better.
Yeah.
You know, if we all knew the applications of how God wanted this marriage thing to work, if we could just put that into play, I think all of us would realize just how awesome, how much more awesome marriage could even be, you know, to where we're at. It only gets better from here.
Well, and I also think the marriage conferences, not only does it help with our marriages, but it also, the ministers that are speaking are there for a reason, and whatever topic they have brought, there's somebody out there that needs some healing inside. And sometimes we don't even know that that's the healing that we need because it's a closed off door to God.
Yes.
But he brings in that healing and restoration within that person for that marriage to be better.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
Yes.
So what's some insecurities and some fears that, especially for you, Vicki, probably that you had to work with going into this, and then Scottie, with you having one failed marriage already, what's some issues that you had to deal with as well? Kind of between the both of you, share a little bit about that.
For me, you know, in those first couple years of kind of just the really tough times, it was kind of that thing of like, is this going to change? You know, is he ever going to realize like we've got to get past this part, you know, and be us, let, you know, our marriage grow and flourish. And is he going to see me for who I truly am, you know, and who God is in me? Because there were just those moments that I was like, how, you know, because my parents were, you know, just, we went to church our whole life. We were raised in it, you know, and my parents, I wouldn't say really ever fought in front of us. Like it was kind of always behind a closed door, which I think that's good. And then in part, sometimes you need to see kind of the resolve of something, you know. But I, you know, went in as like, we have to, you know, you don't go to bed angry and stuff like that. And so in our first, you know, several years of marriage, if we had something going on between us, there were nights I walked in that room and I flipped the light on, you know, because I'm like so angry inside. And then here he is just snoozing away like nothing ever happened.
I was like, what? We're fighting? What's going on?
Yeah. And I'd flip it on and be like, we're going to work this out. Like, you know, and he'd roll over. What are you talking about? I'm like, that makes me even more mad. You know, 'cause you're just like, ah. But anyway, and you know, you have those fears of like, is this ever going to be okay? You know, but God, like, just when things begin to change and he began to, you know, see me for who I was and to realize, you know, we need to move forward.
Yeah.
I think insecurity for me going into a second marriage, you're carrying so much already. Yes, you're allowing God to heal areas in yourself, but you still carry a bunch of memories. You still carry a bunch of things that happened in the previous time. So for me, my insecurity was, am I going to be walking on eggshells when I come in the house and she finds out that I stopped somewhere and grabbed, you know, I spent some money? Are we going to get into a huge fight? Are we going to get into a fight over just little things? So I was always prepared to argue.
Yeah.
But whenever like we would get into an argument, instead of her fighting me, it was crazy because like she would just always respond back in like love, softness, tenderness. And I'm like, what is happening? How come we're not yelling at each other, you know? And why am I the only one yelling? You know, I was just like, what is going on? This is not a right, you know, this is not the way to fight. And it was weird because I realized like, okay, wow, I don't have to fear that she's going to yell and storm out or leave, because I realized like, you know, the person she would always go to whenever things got heated was the Lord. Mm-hmm. And whenever she did, I felt secure in that.
That's awesome. And you know, there's nothing I think more powerful than living that life that way. Right. Because why do a lot of times do our fights extend on very lengths of time between each other? Because we both are at each other.
Yeah.
You know, instead of one person coming in love or in a Christ-like manner, we automatically respond to that anger with anger.
Right.
And so then it just festers and keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it, you know, somebody has to give eventually if it's going to stop.
Right.
And so I think that that's a huge lesson that even Michelle and I's had to, you've got to have God in your marriage. I just, from everything that both of us have walked through And we know a lot of your history, your extensive history. You guys have been in the same boat in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
You're very similar to what Michelle and I have been through in a lot of ways.
We're just
And-
old people.
Well, yeah. but you know, without God and these marriages, both of our marriages,
Right.
it would be rough.
Yeah. Right.
You know, you can't do this stuff on your own. And I think that's a good lesson, really. I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of people out there that they just fight fire with fire,
Yes.
you know. And whenever one spouse is having a bad day or having a bad situation or whatever, the other spouse just, just kindles that fire.
Right,
They come in just all hot and heavy, and it makes it even worse.
Well, I've always been a believer, like in the midst of your fight, in the midst of your feud, I'm not going to take it to a friend and be like, guess what she's doing?
Yeah.
You know, I once heard a pastor say, you know, take it to the throne before you even take it to the phone.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And
So
so
good.
I remember
Great
always,
advice.
even like, you know, for Vicki, she would just go to the prayer closet or just start praying and for me, that was weird, because I was like, are you not going to go, you know, tell
Chew my
someone
head
or,
off.
chew me off, or, you know, or anything like that. But no, she was always going to the Lord and everything. And so to me, that was almost, you know, that was always encouragement for me. Like, I should be doing the same.
Yeah.
You know, and that changed she led by example, you know,
Yep.
to me, and that changed our marriage.
Yeah.
Well, and what was crazy is, you know, and who I would talk to would be my mom. And my mom, just over all these years, she's like, you married someone just like your dad, you know? And so she always just, Vicki, I know this is tough, but like, I know this is who God has put in your life, and you're going to get through this, and it's going to be good, you know? And just always encouraged, instead of, you know, I think sometimes it's easy in marriage. You have those friends, you know, well, this happened and that happened, you know, and if that friend is not directing you back towards the Lord and to
Yeah.
heal your marriage, you need to find some other friends.
That's
Right.
right.
Because
So good.
they do not, you know, if they're not for your marriage, you better not be talking to them.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
Great
So
advice.
you guys, especially you, Vicki, have grown up in a background church-wise similar to what Michelle and I have. And I know you're the same way at this point too when it comes to the divorce thing. But so the fact that, you know, a lot of churches, especially the background that I come from, you know, divorce is really looked down on, and that's a bad, you know, almost disassociate yourself with anybody. It's just it's very legalistic, I guess is the best way to put that. So with that being an issue, you know, a factor here in all of this, did you find where you had certain people sometimes that had opinions about whether, you know, you marrying Scottie with him already being married before and having a child? Did you find any negativity necessarily from any of that? And if you did, how did you handle that?
You know, I honestly can't remember that I really did, you know. I can't think of anybody that ever really said anything to me that I felt that way. And maybe I was just surrounded by a great group of people. But, you know, for the most part, what I can remember is support and love, and, you know.
And that's what's needed
Yeah.
during that time, because we all know that, you know, life happens. Michelle and I have both been divorced. Everybody that's listening to our podcast knows our history. But that doesn't make us worthless.
Right.
You know, that doesn't mean that we can't be loved again. There are things that happen sometimes in life that's just kind of out of control, you know, and Satan has a lot to do with a lot of that. And if we go into things and our focus just isn't quite right, and we're not doing things the way that we should biblically, keeping God out of the equation, there's so many things that can, you know, cause something that's supposed to be good to just totally implode and be a disaster. But, you know, I know a lot of people sometimes they'll look at relationships and it's all fine and dandy when they think you've been married since the very beginning. And, one of you was divorced, you know, and then you get this look in their face and everything's like, what's wrong with that? You know, it's like they're judging you right on the spot, you know? And so I knew that with you guys being in this scenario, you know, if there's anyone listening out there that's, you know, had that take place where they're getting judged or, you know, they've got people that's just pouring negativity trying to tell them you shouldn't be doing this, you know, this is not right and whatever, you know. I think, you know, from my aspect of it, if I ever see somebody doing that, it's like, you know, I'm praying about this.
Sure.
You know, God's going to lead me in all of this. You know, people have their opinions. You know, if opinions are a dime a dozen. Everybody's got one.
That's right.
It's like you have to kind of just, sift through all of those and have discernment with those opinions. But in all reality, if God has put somebody together and He's ordained that relationship,
Right.
Then it can't go wrong.
Right.
I truly believe that. I think that as long as God's in the middle of all of that, then you're on the right path.
Yeah.
And so you can't let that negativity get to you.
Right.
Take that to prayer and to God and let God handle that.
Yes.
So I was kind of curious about that. So as we wrap up this week's episode here, is there anything that you guys kind of wish you would have known before you stepped into this relationship, or did you ever run across anything like that you think, man, I wish I would have, thought of that before, that might have caused a little bit of a hiccup in your relationship at one point, or
good solid advice for anybody
Yeah.
that's going into a marriage, for someone that's not married and someone that's been remarried?
I would say for someone that's, going into a marriage, especially, if that person has been married or has a child, for you 100% to know that this is God's will, because you're going to have some tough times, and you're going to have to know that, okay, this is tough, but God called me to it, and He's going to take me through it. But just to be sure of that.
And I think that's good. I think for me, it's whether you've got kids and you're getting ready to go into a new relationship, take your time.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is give it time for your kids to meet the other person. Say that Vicki and I didn't work out, and Kira loved Vicki from the get-go, then she would have been hurt, And then if I would have dated someone else, then she would have met another person. And man, just take your time to know the other person. Wait on the Lord. Pray over that relationship, and take your time for the kids to meet the other person. And another thing too, you're not alone.
Yeah.
There's so many resources out there. There's so many friends in church. This is not, divorces happen. Things happen for many different reasons, many different dynamics. Don't feel ashamed like you can't reach out for help. There's help out there, and you're not alone in this.
And Scottie, he safeguarded Kira, she already knew me from church, but when we started dating, he didn't, bring me into her life until we had dated for a little while. Just because that it's such a big thing to bring people into your kids' lives.
Yes.
For them to get attached and then to be yanked out. They've already been through enough, with a marriage split and stuff like that. And so just safeguard your kids, because, man, their hearts, they need that protection,
Yeah.
So I was
Very
thankful
true.
he did that.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing. One of the things that I have always admired about both of you guys is the fact that, and I may start crying, so I'm sorry if I start crying.
Don't, because I will.
One of the things that I have admired the most about you guys, that no matter what's being thrown at you guys, you have been positive. You've given great advice and wisdom, even though you didn't know that you gave it, and everything you guys are walking through. But Vicki, your heart for Kira is unknown.
Oh, yeah.
We've went through with Brooke, and you just are so, your wisdom and your grace that you have toward her, and even the ex was just an amazing example to me. And I thought, what if we would have done that, what you guys have done? And I just think about your heart. And when you said earlier, you said God and then the want to. I love that, because the want to is when you're in a relationship that, both of us had kids. One of us didn't. So when one person doesn't, you're taking on everything else.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it has to be God. And it has to be that fight for the want to.
Yeah.
And He has blessed you guys.
Oh, yeah.
Not just as blessing, but He has used you guys. I just admire you guys both immensely. I've watched you walk through things with Kira, and I'm just like,
Oh, yeah, because you walked it with us.
oh my gosh. I'm just like, she didn't yell, she didn't scream, she didn't throw the phone, she didn't talk to her. I'm like,
Call a hitman.
seriously,
Hey, they were
Can we edit that part?
Most wives wouldn't be that way.
Exactly.
You are a godly example of what a stepmother, and I know that you're not a stepmom, you're other mom.
Yeah.
But thank you for that.
Thank you.
Because honestly, your heart has been just something that I'm like, God, I wish I could be like that when I walk through that. And so I know you're helping many people.
Yes.
As you walk. God just comes out of you when it comes to, he comes out of you all the time, don't get me wrong, but it's hard to deal with exes, kids from other, Dan and I have talked about it numerous times.
Yeah.
And your love.
Right.
Thank you.
For not only Kira, before your ex-wife.
And can I add on to that? You asked the question earlier, what were some of the insecurities? I was always secure because of her relationship with the Lord. Like you were saying, that she was just very loving and tender, and she had all the knowledge. And I'm like, where is all this coming from? But I knew where it came from. Yeah. And that was security for me. It's like, man, she's got that connection with the Lord. I need that. And that's what encouraged me to go move on with what we have.
Thank you for that. It's been a lot of hours in a prayer closet, and I cannot say that I've done it all right. That's for sure. It's been a lot of moments of Jesus saying, you better check your heart right now, and you better straighten it up. But thank you.
Yeah, that in Proverbs 31, there's a Proverbs 31 woman.
Yes.
And I actually, in my Bible reading that I do, I actually had read that one here within this last month, and I'd forgotten a lot of what that chapter actually says, And as I was reading through that, I was like, I'm so thankful for myself that, even with Michelle, I can see so many of those attributes in her.
Yes.
And she's changed me.
Yes.
I understand, Scottie, what you're saying, because, I came into our marriage very stubborn in a lot of ways. I had my own opinions about things. I wanted my way or the highway in a lot of things. And it almost drove us to a divorce. It's like, I thought I was doing it all right. I had no idea, and that's a problem that we have a lot of times is when we come into these relationships, especially if we've been in a relationship before, we don't realize it. But a lot of those bad things that caused the first one to fail, we start rehashing that again as we come into the next one if we're not careful. Yeah. And then the next thing you know, you're right back in a scenario again where you're about to lose everything. And that's why it's so important, as we've said many times on this podcast, you got to keep God in the middle of everything that you do.
Yes.
And so I do. I thank God for those Proverbs 31 women that keeps us guys on track. And keeps us lined out, because it's so easy for us to go on our own little paths sometimes and be troublemakers. So God gives them a lot of grace. That's for sure. Well, I want to thank you guys for sitting here with us for this first episode. This has been awesome. And like I said, we've got a couple more to go here over the next couple of weeks, as you guys are going to be sitting with us here doing a couple different episodes. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this one up, though, and call it good on this one. Don't forget that if you want all of these episodes, make sure that you subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any of the episodes. Daniel Moore, Michelle's been sitting here with me, my beautiful co-host, as we've been talking to Scottie and Vicky Albious. They're our guests this week on our podcast. And we just want you to know that this show will really be possible without you. If you're a fan of our show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you would like to help us out, just take a few seconds, give us a 5-star review or a click, and please subscribe to us on your favorite platform. The links for those are in the show notes. Well, that's all for this week. And we pray that your marriage is stronger and your walk with God is closer after this episode. This is an extension of the Connecting the Gap Ministries, and we pray that you have a blessed week.
You've been listening to Connecting the Gap podcast. In this world, there are many disconnects that cause chaos in our lives. This podcast is birthed from the desire to share hope and restoration of the power of the gospel by being transparent and open in our biblical walk with God. Each week, we take a few moments as we navigate God's word and peer into other people's testimonies and encourage each other to connect the gap. We upload a new audio podcast every Thursday and a video version of it on YouTube and Rumble. We are also on the Christian podcasting app, Edify. You can subscribe to our podcast on many of the available podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, and more. We are also available on your Alexa-enabled devices. If you would like to contact our ministry for any reason, visit our contact page and send us a message. We hope you are blessed by this ministry. This is a production of Connecting the Gap Ministries.